Hi, this is Shane Gibson. I'm a manager for the Technical Experts in the Americas for Business Applications. I'm just going to do an overview of vRealize. Part of this unit is to cover vRealize automation, and vRealize automation is part of a suite of tools. So I'm hoping that I can give you just an overview and an understanding of where it fits. So you can see here that the structure is broken out by several components. At the bottom, you have your physical layer, which would be like server, storage, and network. Then you have your virtual layer, which would be vSAN, NSX, and vSphere. So those are those elements at the VMware layer, and then of course you've got some other tools down there, some other virtualization technologies like OpenStack and Red Hat and Citrix. And then there's cloud technologies, which really sit outside of the physical environment if you're talking about public and private, but those would also exist on some sort of physical hardware somewhere else in a data center, if that's the public cloud, which is shown there. So if we move up a layer here, it's broken out into these components, where you have operations, which is vRealize operations, and automation, which is vRealize automation. And then you have another business suite component that can plug onto that, and it could give you chargeback and costs and projections and things like that. So it's a very comprehensive tool to help you manage both your public and your private environment, and it's heterogeneous. So it's not just VMware technologies that it manages. It can actually manage all those other virtualization technologies you see listed there, and it can also connect to other cloud technologies like Amazon, Azure, and even some that may not be listed here. What it does is it allows you to do a lot of automation, which is like blueprints. And the blueprint concept is a workflow that allows you to build out an environment. So it could be all virtual, so that could be like a web tier, database tier, and then like maybe a firewall in front of that, and then maybe it connects to an external web instance. So there's a lot of different extensibility and options you could do there. But with that blueprint, you build that out, and it's a repeatable, buildable process that also becomes scriptable. So if you've heard the term infrastructure as code, you can make that blueprint an API call, and it can be easily invoked and then built out. And you could even build out some physical environments too. So that there could be a physical component to that with other third-party tools. So maybe you need to update some firewall rules on an F5 firewall. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here, and that could be part of your blueprint. Enhanced governance, so there's policies around this, and there's security policies, there's storage policies, there's compute policies, and these policies are going to govern how these things are deployed and repeatable and according to your standards. And then the self-service experience. And this part is really cool. In the fact that if you heard the term self-service portal, this allows an admin to build out an infrastructure, an environment, or even just an application. And the users request these, possibly dev, test folks, and you can send them to a self-service portal where they can check out an environment. They click a button, and it deploys that environment behind it. So that could be, like I said, Linux, it could be deep learning, it could be SAP HANA. And we've actually done some of these on our own in an SAP HANA environment and build that out in the background. And this can even tie into a point where the user just submits a ticket in the ServiceNow, that ticket gets approved, and once it's approved, it kicks off the blueprint and the workflow that gets deployed, and then the user has their environment available to them. And then also flexible cloud deployment, so you could deploy externally into any cloud, either on-prem or off-prem. So it has a lot of options. It's very extensible with a lot of third-party plugins. I mentioned like F5. There's backup tools. There's all kinds of different tools that run your infrastructure that could be a plugin to the vRealize suite to allow you to do a lot of this automation, and then lifecycle management to allow you to do upgrades and orchestrating across your enterprise, all of the components that need to be upgraded and in what order and whatnot. So it's really the tool of all tools to manage your enterprise. And here you can see kind of a stack view of where it fits as far as the I guess you could say, the journey in the cloud, or where it fits all the way from generation 1 all the way to generation 3. So generation 1 would be your traditional infrastructure, what we're used to, storage, compute, and network, physical components. And then second gen would be something like everything provisioned in a VM or a virtual environment. And then third generation would be something like containers. So getting right down to the application layer, stripping away a lot of the hypervisor, a lot of the the requirement for a whole OS to host that, and then microservices. So this is really where you get into microservices, and you only use the components of the application that you need. You don't have to have a large operating system or something, or a large operating system with that maybe even virtualized to run this. This can run just the pieces that it needs in the cloud. And that's important because if you try to replicate your infrastructure in the cloud, you may end up paying a lot more than you expected to host that in the cloud. So you really want to get this defined and down, very efficient, down to only what you need as far as the microservices to run your application, so you can make best use of that public cloud. And again, this covers everything in your enterprise, and is part of a software-defined data center. So if you've heard those terms, this is one of those things to get you there. Now, you may know about our UCPRS based on SDDC Manager, software-defined data center. Keep in mind, that is not really a cloud management tool. That is maybe an infrastructure cloud, but it's something to manage at the infrastructure layer. If you want to manage a cloud, you would need something like vRealize Suite. One of the more powerful things that vRealize offers are the blueprints, and you can see here there's a blueprint, and this blueprint ties to a catalog item that can be kicked off and invoke all of these steps to deploy your environment. And here you see some governments like HIPAA, and then you've got database and app server that connect together, and they connect to a network. And there's policies behind that. There's storage. There's an operating system. So think of everything that is needed to run an application or an infrastructure virtually, or some physical components could be part of that too. And over to the left, you have some quick categories, and you can drag and drop these items onto your blueprint and build out that environment in this blueprint. And like I said, this ties into a catalog item. So at the right, you see a catalog item, and what the end user will see is part of their self-service portal. And you can create t-shirt sizes, so small, medium, and large. And you can pare that down to where the user really only sees a small piece of what they're getting. So if they select small, then they're going to get a certain configuration that maybe 2 cores, maybe a certain amount of storage, and maybe only a certain amount of CPU in that configuration, or memory in that configuration, or you define all of those, and there is a description that they can look at so they can see what they get, but it allows them in just a few short clicks to be able to deploy what they need. And it really takes a lot of the guesswork out for the administrator to have to manually go through and recreate these things. So he can create these standardized templates and blueprints that the users can easily consume. And there are limits too. So each user, you could limit that they only get small or they only get large. Just a screenshot of what that self-service portal looks like. And here you can see a variety of catalog items. One of these catalog items could actually exist externally in the cloud. So that one of these could be, Linux on AWS, or certain services on AWS, as they offer analytics and a bunch of other tools. And you can provide these here, which would provide a link to AWS or any other cloud provider and be consumed here. And as you can see, we've got options here to build out a blueprint with our public cloud, and you can drag and drop those into your blueprint. Another add-on to this in the business suite is you could get costing information. So you can make judgments, and even the users can make judgments if you want them to be able to see this. But some of these metrics are automatically loaded. Some of them you can manually configure. but you can understand, okay, if I'm consuming this much in which one of these clouds, where am I going to save the most or have the most be the most cost effective for my environment? Because at first, maybe going public cloud might seem the least expensive way to go. And there's a lot of factors like FTEs and other things because there's people involved. You have people managing your data center, but when you get down to like the per VM cost or what's consumed, you can do a quick comparison here and understand what your true costs are. And this is just, where you can configure some of that and add costs to those blueprints. So you could have these costs, what's being consumed and what that total cost is, and you can adjust that because you might be able to figure out what that is in your own environment, and then it'll give you a total cost for like chargeback if you're a department that you want to do chargeback to another department, or even showback to show like, okay, this is how much money that we've consumed or saved or something like that. So each one of those components can have a cost associated with them. So as someone creates a request, they're going to get total cost, and of course those costs are added to that blueprint you saw on the previous slide. And here's just a great overview of the ecosystem, how Hitachi fits into this. So there are APIs for our Data Instance Director and even Hitachi Automation Director. So let's just talk about Data Instance Director. As you know, that's an orchestration tool to help easily create. That has a blueprint component to that to do your backups and replication and other functions to help users easily do that with push button accuracy and repeatability. Now, that could be part of a blueprint within vRealize. So as you're building out your environment, you may want to add protection to that. And one of those protection plans could be a call to Data Instance Director, which has a workflow behind it that allows that particular VM or infrastructure that you are deploying to be able to build out, to add those protections. And then you can also add a cost to that. And then you have a bare metal provisioning component with a UCP advisor. So part of that workflow could be like, okay, I need some bare metal instances to evoke. So the UCP advisor has a host of APIs, and you can evoke that as part of your workflow, and then do some bare metal deployment. And that might even include provisioning of VLAN within a UCP CI. Or even maybe you're doing a full UCP RS or a VCF SDDC deployment. So there's a lot of things that you can do here, and UCP Advisor could help leverage. There's some capabilities within UCP Advisor to do that, and then Automation Director that also has a blueprint. It's a lot like vRealize Automation because it has workflows and blueprints. But maybe a customer has this, or we've built it for them, and there are catalog items because that also has a self-service like portal, and you can have vRealize Automation evoke a workflow within Hitachi Automation Director to kick off certain process that maybe we've built. And we have a lot of custom workflows that we built for Hitachi Automation Director specifically for our storage and in the environments that we go into. So that might be an advantage where they already have vRealize Automation. They're like, well, we don't want to build all of this. And we have a lot of those templates and blueprints built within Automation Director, and we could put that in there, and then they can evoke that. So this is kind of this is a bigger view of the vRealize stack, and something I want you to pay attention to is the top level there. It's a multi-tenant capable cloud portal tool. So you could have multiple companies, even with their own branding in each one of those tenants. We have a tool called Hitachi Enterprise Cloud, and you may have heard of it. It's so one of the aspects of Hitachi Enterprise Cloud is that we offer vRealize as the basis of that. There's other offerings for containers and things like that under the Hitachi Enterprise Cloud moniker, but in this instance, we have built out a tenant and we branded it with Hitachi logo, and it says Hitachi Enterprise Cloud. In fact, there's a demo that you'll be able to watch, and it could show that. So anything with our demo center will have Hitachi Enterprise Cloud and be branded, but behind it is vRealize. And there's a lot of roles that are defined here too, like fabric managers and different aspects. We can provide guidance on how to build this. And I always say, plan from the top down and build from the bottom up. Be very clear what you want that portal to look like, what you want the tenants to look like, or if there are tenants, and what do you want it to do for you, and then build a base that will support that. Instead of trying to cloudify whatever components you have on the floor, it always seems to work better if you have a clear idea of what that portal is going to look like and what you want it to do for you, and then you start building from the bottom up. And this is how we plug in and some of our APIs. So we have a VASA provider, and that's VMware API for storage awareness. And that reports all of the storage capabilities with some auto tagging and stuff to the vCenter environment. So if you're provisioning a VM, then you'll know what kind of storage you're going on to, what kind of volume. So it could be like a GAD volume. And I'll show you in just a few minutes what that looks like in the vRealize context. And there's also an API, like I said, for HDID, which would be another VM. So the VASA provider is a VM, and it acts as a broker between vCenter and our storage. And then a layer above that would be our, vRealize or vRealize automation. And it reports, so over to the right, you can see a screenshot of what that looks like. So that VM has a web interface, and it attaches a storage. And there you can configure containers, which will contain volumes, and then you could attach data or names to what that storage is providing. As you can see there, performance ops class would be tier 1. So when you're provisioning a VM, you'll see in that context, what it'll be like tier 1 ops, and you'll know that's going like on FMD. And there's also availability, so that could be like GAD, or it could be snapshot or something like that, or it could just be basic replication. And the term for all this is storage policy-based management. So it allows your vCenter to know where the VMs are being placed and what's on the back end of that. And they could be divided into tiers like bronze, silver, and gold, just to make it more basic. So they'll know, like, if a VM is assigned to a certain policy, then it will deploy it onto that tier of storage and guaranteed a certain level of service. Just a little overview of, here's a quick overview of vVols and service levels and configuration of options and tagging that you can do. And you can see here that you can here's a quick screenshot of one of those capability profiles that you could build for a pool of storage. In this case, it would be for a vVol. And you can put a name here, tier 1 performance and DR availability. And you'll see that within the vCenter environment when you're deploying a VM. And it conforms to tier 1 IOPS, performance latency class of tier 1 latency, so under probably 5 milliseconds or more. And then availability class of tier 2, tier 3. And those are defined in other places. So that could be, like I said, snapshotting. Tier 1 would probably be GAD or something like that. And you can assign, cost to that. And when you're selecting where that VM is going to go, you can search for a data store that is going to provide, this business critical service at $800 a month. So that's another factor when you're deploying the VM. And within here, when you're defining the policies for where this VM is going to go, so you're going to, deploy, you're creating a new VM, and there's a storage policy. Well, here's this. And then you would go into vCenter and define the policy to attach to that. Is here you could see where the provider is, which is our Hitachi storage provider or VASA provider. And then it's pulling in some of those tags, and then you build out this policy. So just just a really quick overview of the VASA provider and some of the functionality in the tagging information. And all of this is can be pulled into vCenter, and you can understand that tier 1 performance and DR availability is going to be on the DP5 pool, and FMD, it's an HDP pool, and has a total of 6.4 terabytes available. So the vCenter environment is going to be aware of like what kind of physical storage it's going to be on. And then when you build your policy in vCenter, you could pull some of these tags and have your own policy, and you just call it gold. And then anything that conforms to these levels is going to be like tier 1, and these attributes to it is going to be classified as gold. And so you can see here availability tier 1, and it's based on the storage policy based management, and the cost between 750 and 1,000. And these were all defined, these are all tagging from our storage provider that's being advertised back to our vCenter environment. So at a high level, I mean, you have a VASA provider, which can understand what your storage array is, it's FMD, and then does some auto tagging, so it knows like FMD is probably going to be tier 1 performance. And then you can do some custom stuff where it's like, okay, you know what the cost is, it's $800 a month. Maybe there's a lease or capacity on demand type around that, and then you could add that as part of the tags. And then within your vCenter environment, all that information is pulled in, and then you can build your policy here, so that when you are deploying your VMs at the vCenter level, you're going to understand what where that VM is going to be deployed. So here's a rule that's set, disk type, I could see that as an FMD, then it's a tier 1 class, availability class is also tier 1. Just to show you what these policies look like from the vCenter context. Encryption could be a part of that too, so keep that in mind. We see that there's HTTP and HTTP pools advertised too as tags, so a lot of good information from the storage array that the VMware environment wouldn't be normally aware of if it wasn't for the VASA provider. And perhaps part of the capability is data location. So you could have a metro cluster or something like that, or remote site, and you want to understand where that's it, where your environment is. Maybe you have NSX and BX LAN with a linked mode, and when you deploy it, you want to be aware that you're deploying it, what geolocation you're deploying it in. So I talked a little bit before about the tenant and the branding, and here's a screenshot of Hitachi Enterprise Cloud, which is backed by vRealize. And here you can see some catalog items that we've pre-configured. And here you can see we've built out a workflow or blueprint behind this, and I have some selections here to just do a basic VM deployment, and there are t-shirt sizes. So it's like small, medium, large, and extra large. And then I also have the option, I can, if I allow it, they can adjust some of these settings, and then add some more CPU and memory. But what I really want to look at are how those policies tied back from our VASA provider go up to this cloud layer. And you can see here, this is GAD. So say I select disk storage policy GAD, I know that's going to be on a global active device. Database policy may have some certain rules behind it. It might be on RAID 10, something like that. And then platinum storage, silver, VM encryption policy, so that could be encrypted disks. So when I build out my workflow, and then there's a template for that catalog item, and I can create this GUI with this information. I can lock down what they see or what they have available, but this is just to show you how those policies from the storage array get advertised up through the cloud layer and what that looks like. And then here you can see a couple of other options. So we have snapshot capability, and that could be from our V2I plugin, which is an API into vCenter, and then where it's doing space efficient snaps on the storage array and offloading storage array snapping, a copy on write type snapshot, and then backup policy, and this is API tied to HDID, and gold could be any number of type of backups. So you define those within HDID, and then you could get even more expanded information if the admin advertises it. So gold could be under information could show you that maybe it's extra backed up, or there's several copies or something like that. And then down here you have the disk policies like I was shown before, where you have options of where to deploy. So we support vVols on our storage array, so this could be a vVol data store that you're deploying it on. And then vSAN is also a possibility. So in that hybrid mode where we have a hyperconverged attached to SAN storage, then you may want to select vSAN and you want to be part of the hyperconverged environment. But from the context of the user through the self-service portal, they don't really care where it's being deployed, or they shouldn't care where it's being deployed physically. They're just selecting options that fit what's best for their application. And then down here, there's a cost here. It's in euros, but this could be dollars or whatever currency for your geo is. And then as they build this out, this price will change with whatever cost that I've associated with these tags or with these policies. So, I could build out other workflows, HDID backed, policy for Windows 2016 server. And there's different ways I can present this catalog item to users with custom forms and stuff. So I could just do something really quick, within a couple of clicks, they could just have their options. So there was an advanced options what we were seeing before, but they could just say, hey, I want the, small, medium, large selection. I want gold backup policy, and, whatever. This is just a basic server. So I hope that helps you understand and tie these things together. There's demos available, and there's also an offline demo that you could do for vRealize, which we'll show in another video. And then there's a video of vRealize with Hitachi Enterprise Cloud that you could check out too. And it'll kind of take you through some of these things live, and some of these screenshots came from that video. So I hope you understand how these things stack together. You have the infrastructure layer, then you have, at least in the Hitachi context, you have APIs in the middle for HDID and storage, and then those tie into vCenter, and then from vCenter, then you go up to vRealize automation, you build out your blueprint, and then there's a catalog item that the user can select that then propagates all that downward and makes it very easy and repeatable. Thank you for your time, and I hope that was informative and you got really good information out of that.